I start by sharing an idea I heard in Parshas Noach, 1977. Yeah? Wonderful. I was in Eretz Yisrael in Chavetz Chaim, and the entire yeshiva came from Forest Hills. The Rosh Yeshiva always wanted to come to Eretz Yisrael. He felt he couldn't because of his obligations in America. But he loved Eretz Yisrael, and from time to time he would pick up the entire yeshiva and move. So this was shortly after the building was built in Sanhedrin Rechevet, and he brought the whole yeshiva. The married couples had to all find apartments. Everybody had to scramble, but he brought the whole yeshiva for a year. And it was a balagan, because it was a yeshiva that was used to catering to 25 students, and now it has 200 people. So a number of the Talmidim got together and started a chesed vad. And the Rosh Yeshiva asked Rosh Yeshiva to speak at the first meeting of the chesed vad. Well, everybody who showed up didn't really care that much about chesed. They just wanted to hear the Rosh Yeshiva speak. And it was very crowded in the room. It was really meant for the chesed vad. But he quoted a medrash. And that is, as we know, at the end of the Mabul, Noach comes out and he plants a vineyard. And we know that story ends very poorly. Yeah? And the Medrash says, is the Medrash Rabbah, that as soon as he got ready to plant the vineyard, the Satan was the first one who volunteered to help. Because, he said, anytime you want to start an undertaking, the first person who wants to join is the Satan. Be able to undermine things from the inside. I remember that idea that he said. And I heard somebody else tell a story from another major yeshiva. I want to mention it. But he said that he also started a chesed vad. And the Rosh Yeshiva spoke to me after a week, and he says, how's it going? He goes, great. Everybody's signing up. Everybody's taking on tafkidim. It looks great. Everything's looking terrific. And the Rosh Yeshiva looked a little upset. And I couldn't understand why. So I see him about 3 months later. He says, no, how's it going? I said, terrible. Nobody's keeping their word. Nobody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Everybody's giving me a hard time. Everybody's fighting over this. I'm just going to close the whole thing down. And the Rosh Yeshiva said, Baruch Hashem. And he goes, what? He says, when you told me at the beginning that everything was going great, I got a little suspicious. Because where's the Satan? Where's the Yetzer Hara? He's the first one who gets involved in every organization. And if he's not trying to stop you, then it must be that you are the Satan. It must be that you're the Yetzer Hara. And I was going to tell my son to drop out. And now that I see you're having trouble, Baruch Hashem, I know you're doing something good. And I give you a bracha, you should be matzliach, and he gave me chizik, and I kept going, even though it was much more difficult. I'm living in Har Nof 37 years. And over those 37 years, there have been a large percentage of Dovrei Anglit who live in Har Nof. Yeah, it may be less today. A lot of them ran away to Beit Shemesh, where there is a small percentage of Hebrew-speaking Israelis. But in Har Nof, there's still a large percentage. And many people have felt that I don't really have a makom, especially because the model of a kehillah that we have in America and in England, they don't have here. Because as somebody said to me many times, in Chutz La'aretz you join a community. Here you look for a place to daven. And if this one's closer, or this one's faster, or this one's this, I'll go over there. But not because I feel a commitment. You know, maybe I like tables, maybe I like chairs, whatever the, stand is, whatever it is. But there's not a sense of community. As somebody said to me, if you know the names of all the people in your building, you must be the Vad Bayit. You know what I mean? Because that's it. I had a neighbor once said to me, he goes, I'm afraid that I'm going to die in my apartment and I will be left there until someone finally notices they haven't seen me for a while and figure they can buy it at a discount. You know what I mean? But it's a very big place. And so I decided I'm going to try to start something. And I started to make a little kehillah, which at this point has the very, very clever name of the Rabbi Orlofsky Shul. I think we need to change that personally, because, even Sharfman's isn't called Sharfman's. It has a real name, you know what I mean? And same thing with Centers. All these places have real names. They just call it by that. So, you got to have at least a real name. And we got started, and I found that we have filled a need in the community. So we have, I would say, somewhere between 30 and 40 families who daven by us, on a fairly regular basis. So we decided to try to expand this to the community. And Slichos night, we made a special event. We had about 100 people, and it was really a very special event. We had a special minyan for Shana Yom Kippur, and we had close to 200 people come and daven with us. And I spoke, Leib Kellerman, who davens in the shul, spoke, and the drushes were in English, and the davening was user-friendly. And I think the feedback we got was everyone had a wonderful time. And so we had a Simchas Beis Shoeva with close to 100 people, and Baruch Hashem, so I have to say that Yaakov Meir is really the moving force of this, where he believes that what we're doing is something that serves a greater need, and we're limited by space. If we had a real location, we could do more. But in the meantime, we're working around with what we could do. So one of the schusim that we have in our little tiny minyan, in a little tiny place in the chutzner of the Rabbi Orlofsky, estate, is that Mr. Stark has chosen to come and daven with us when he comes. And for me, this is a tremendous covet, because he is an Adam Choshev Ad Ma'od. I only knew that he was an Adam Choshev Ad Ma'od. I didn't know anything else about him. And one time when he was there, so his son said, maybe ask my father to say a little something about Sukkot. And I said, sure. And he told the story of what happened to him when he was in the concentration camp, and actually a work camp, by Sukkot. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So someone said, well, he wrote a book, about his experiences. And I read it, and it was, by the way, the money that you gave tonight is going to republish the book. And I read it, and it was just astounding. And he spoke again by us, and Shabbos Shuvah, and Yaakov Meir, who's always got his eye out for the community, said, this is something that everybody should get to participate in. And that is why we have made this event and invited the community to be able to hear whatever Mr. Stark chooses to share with us. He is not shy. And like I said, he's an Adam Choshev without having gone through what he went through. But considering what he went through, I can only tell you that I sit down and I think of a 14-year-old, what he went through and what he survived and what he went on to do. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have made it to the train, because I just don't have those kind of kaiches. And I just listen to these stories, and it's the kind of things that make you appreciate how little you've actually accomplished with your life, which I think is always a wonderful thing. So without any further ado, it is a privilege. Are you doing an introduction? To introduce Mr. Israel Stark.
It's just all the same. Okay. Well, I'm not going to speak that much, but okay. We can speak. You could put it in the place, so just so it's ready. But I will project. Erev Tov. Thank you. Shvua Tov. And an early Chodesh Tov to everyone here. I want to thank Rabbi Orlofsky for your gracious words, and I would also like to take this opportunity to express my sincere Hakarita Tov to Rabbi Orlofsky and his Kehila for accommodating my father's place in the minyan over the past month. It was very gracious and it was very welcoming. And I want to thank you for that personally and publicly. Also, special thank you to Yaakov Meir for his initiative and his work to arrange this impromptu event and inviting my father, Mr. Israel Stark, and myself to speak with you today and bringing us all together this evening. This is far, oh, I see, I have to be in range. This is far from my father's first foray into speaking. Blanhard, he's been doing this for over 40 years, and he's spoken at Jewish schools and different institutions and military and government institutions and yeshivas and in Israel he's spoken and all across the U.S. in different cities, and the bottom line is he's gotten around a little bit and he's finally made his way to Har Nof. I think this marks the first time he's speaking in Har Nof, even though he's been an unofficial resident for over 30 years. Now, I would also like to thank you who are in this room, everyone who's in this room in attendance today. If you are in this room right now, you have a unique, possibly for some of you, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet and interact with a witness to one of the most significant and horrific eras in human history. You know, often we come together to recall Churban Europe in times such as the anniversary of Kristallnacht or Yom HaShoah or the 3 weeks. But at the same time, and also in light of the past 2 years where Klal Yisrael has suffered its own modern-day Churban, there is no wrong time to recall these events and seek inspiration from those who walked it before we have. Now, most of the precious neshamot who defied the odds and rose out of the ashes of Nazi death camps are no longer with us. The number of Jewish men and women who can sit before us today and bear witness to the atrocities perpetrated against mankind is dwindling with each passing year. So with that said, I'm going to encourage each and every one of you in this room to take advantage of this evening and think about the things you'd like to ask. And
each passing year, almost each passing month or week.
Well, yeah, we don't want to think about that, but I'm trying to be generous, give people more time. So I would like to, to take advantage and to think of the lessons you'd like to understand and what you want to walk away with, and that's why we're here this evening. Now, with my father's permission, I'm going to share with you a brief introduction that will give you a timeline of his personal experiences for those who have not read his book, A Boy Named 68818. Available at some bookstores and Amazon's. Copies are dwindling because there will be, God willing, a second edition publication. And God willing, around Pesach time or a little bit before or after, a Hebrew version we're hoping to put out. So no you can. Is what?
No copies here.
Not today. Halavai, I wish we had more copies on hand to offer you. But that tells you how popular the book is. It's already been sold out. So with that said, After I give you this timeline, the rest of the evening is going to be dedicated to you and having a conversation with my father. And seriously, I will encourage you to ask anything you ever wanted to ask. Now, Srulik Storch, as he was known, Srulik was born to Herschel and Chana Storch, and in 1929. I'll let you do the math. And he was born in a town called Podhoryan, just outside the city of Munkach, which was located by the Carpathian region of eastern Czechoslovakia. He was the youngest of 3 siblings, the older 3 being girls, and one of whom unfortunately passed away before the war due to illness. Now, Srulik was an average boy, just like, you might have, your own children, nothing different. He attended school for Jewish and secular studies. And this was also the time before the internet and phones. So, Srulik had to make his own mischief, his own fun. So, I'll give you an example. There was one time where, Srulik had an exam coming up that he was not prepared for. So, I'm not going to tell you that he didn't study for it, and I'm not going to tell you that his Rebbe had a deathly allergic allergy to garlic, and I'm not going to tell you that Srulik took his Rebbe's switch and he rubbed it with garlic from all over. And I'm not going to tell you that when his Rebbe came in that morning and picked up the switch and held it in his hand and waved it in the air to the students, he turned red and he went into anaphylactic shock. I'm not going to tell you any of that, but what I will tell you is that as a result of this, Srulik did not take the test, and he probably couldn't sit down for 2 weeks after that happened. So just to give you an idea of the kind of childhood he had, it was very precious and very, very loving. And it really wasn't until March of 1944, over 80 years ago, that Srulik's life turned upside down. It was just prior to Pesach that the Nazis, Yamach Shemim, occupied his house and turned one of the rooms into a command center. Now imagine, if you will, what it might be like to be conducting your Pesach Seder with German soldiers occupying the next room, and maybe replace German soldiers with Hamas, whoever our modern day Amalek is, and try and comprehend what that might be like. And after the Chag, the Storch family were told, you have 1 hour to pack whatever you can and leave your house. Now, they and their friends and their neighbors at this time were transferred to a brick factory that was turned into a makeshift ghetto. In May, after the Chag, all the Jews in the ghetto, which numbered about 116,000 people, were loaded into cattle cars or of a freight train and told that they were being relocated to work on Hungarian farms. Now imagine this 3-day trip. There was no in-flight service on this train, no food, no water. Just imagine the crowd, shoulder to shoulder. People couldn't stand, they couldn't sit. There was no toilets, and I'm not going to go into detail what that might be like. And at some point, people said to Cyrillic, Cyrillic, we're going to hoist you up. Look at the above window and read out the stations as the train slows down. So every stop, they hoisted him up, and he's reading out names like Prezov, Zakopane, Makov, Podolansky. And it became apparent that they weren't really heading to Hungary. They were heading in a different direction altogether. And they soon learned that they were heading to Poland. 6 weeks later, sure enough, they arrived to Auschwitz, the infamous concentration camp in Poland. And upon arrival, even before he stepped off the emptied cattle car, was the first of many instances in which Cyrillic's life was saved. However, shortly thereafter, Cyrillic and his father were separated from his mother and his 2 sisters, and this was the last time he saw his mother. 6 weeks after that, Cyrillic and his father were transferred to Mauthausen. This would be the second of 4 concentration camps that Cyrillic would encounter. And this was a concentration camp in Austria. Now, 2 things were significant about his stay in Mauthausen. Number 1, this is where he received his number, 68818. And the second significant thing is that this would be the place where he was separated from his father, never to see him again. In June 1944, Cyrillic was transferred to the death camp of. Here he spent the bulk of his time, and as he became known as the Spitzenträger. This was the carrier of the pointers. And if you're curious what that means, you'll be able to ask him yourself. In April 1945, the Allies were closing in, and the prisoners of Melk were moved on a death march, and Cyrillic arrives to Ebensee, which would be the last camp he would experience. On May 4th, 1945, Cyrillic and his friends noticed that a lot of the guard towers were empty suddenly, for the Germans had started to retreat from Ebensee. And on May 6th of 1945, liberation from Ebensee came. The Americans arrived and set up a rations kitchen to disastrous effect. But Cyrillic describes that day as the prisoners rushing forward and kissing the steel treads of the U.S. tanks. On May 7th, Germany surrendered, and then the next day was VE Day and the end to World War II. In August of 1945, Cyrillic arrived back to Munkach, and spoiler alert, he was reunited with his 2 older sisters, who also survived. During this time, while they were still in Europe, Cyrillic's sisters married, while Cyrillic made repeated attempts to immigrate to pre-state Israel, but without success. In August of 1947, Eleanor Roosevelt sponsored 500 war orphans to immigrate to the U.S. And at the age of 17, Cyrillic boarded the SS Ernie Pyle and sailed to America by himself with a valise and nothing but $2 to his name. And on his way to America, his very first purchase, for 10 cents, a bottle of Coca-Cola. So he was already becoming an American. And just imagine for a moment, to being an orphan, a refugee, you're by yourself without your parents at a young age and finding yourself on a ship or a plane, crossing the ocean to a country that you have never been to and not knowing a word of the language. Mr. Stark moved to Chicago in 1948. Eventually, his sisters managed to immigrate to the U.S. as well, and they settled in New York with their respective families. Over his many visits to New York, he met Ethel Ehrman, his wife-to-be, and they married in 1957. By profession, Izzy Stark, as he was now known, became a diamond merchant and the founder and sole proprietor of the I. Stark Company. Fast forward to today, Mr. Stark is a philanthropist and a pillar within the Chicago Jewish community, and an author. He is a father to 7, a grandfather to 40, and a great-grandfather to over 60, with more on the way, b'sha'at tova. So, as I mentioned before, I will now encourage you to take this opportunity to get to know him a little better. And again, this is not the time to be shy. You know, again, this is a beautiful setting. And so when anyone has any question, simply raise your hand and stand up and speak with a loud voice so he can hear you. And you know, I want to introduce my father, Mr. Israel Stark.
Sit.
Be careful of the
I see it. Dovid, you did a wonderful job.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, going into my early life, my background, and you probably got most of the information. And if you have any questions regarding something which was not clear to you, I'll be very happy to answer it. But before our Rishon, I don't think I need it.
Let's put it on the side.
Okay. First of all, it's very important for me to say Chazdei Hashem Ki Lo Yisamni. I want to give a shvach v'oidua to the Rabbeinu Shalom that he brought me up to this point. He brought me up here where I had the wonderful Yomim Neroim Rishon Yom Kippur, as Rabbi Orlofsky mentioned in his shul. And I hope the Rabbeinu Shalom listened to our tefillas in our tefillas in his Kabul. And of course, it's different to be in Yerushalayim than in Chicago, but I've been in both places. I was, after Dudi gave the brief introduction about my youth, I says, first of all, I would like to also thank Rabbi Orlofsky and Yaakov Meir for organizing this evening, and whoever is here. I would like to thank you all for taking out time and coming to listen to me for a little while. I'd like to start to tell you, first of all, about our arrival into Auschwitz. As we arrived into Auschwitz and the command was given to aussteigen by a young prisoner who was in charge of these Hungarian transports that have been arriving day after day, night after night. As he was so everybody, of course, got off immediately. It was certainly a big relief when they opened up those freight cars, and suddenly the air came in and revived many people. And the window was aussteigen, and as pretty soon there was the line of I believe where they would give us the selection, the line of selection by a call by the Melech HaMoves. I mean, and older men and children and women went on one side, and the younger men who were able-bodied men who were able to work, at least the Melech HaMoves decided that they will be able to work and contribute to the great needs of the German Reich. They sent to a different direction. I, of course, the minute I had a four, as you probably will hear from others and so forth, I had somebody gave me a tip-off that Srolik asked me how old I am, wie alt bist du? And I said, ich bin 14 years. And he says, die bist nicht 14, die bist 18. That was while we were still staying on that empty freight car. I, of course, started to argue with him, and it says, Jingele, du fragt me nicht kein Kasches. Here we do not ask any questions. If I tell you that you're 18, remember now that you're 18. And of course, thank goodness I remembered when the selection came, I brought it out in a loud voice, I'm 18. And he told me to follow my father to a certain direction. As eventually they lined us up again, as they lined us up so often in lines of 5 in each line, and eventually they marched us into a very, very big empty place, like a big hangar, where there were a lot of prisoners standing there with clippers, hair clippers to shave off all our hair. And there we had to undress completely, naked. And this is where the last, I put on my tefillin there on top of my clothing for the last time. The only thing you were allowed to keep is your shoes. And that if you had a good pair of shoes, eventually some older prisoner came along and says, give me your shoes. So all these things have been happening later on. But you were allowed to keep the shoes, and that's about it. No pens, no pencils, no paper, no watches, no calendars, nothing. So consequently, I, as a little boy, as he was cutting my hair, I wanted to ask a few times one of these so-called barbers. I says, what is going to happen to us? What is going to be our destiny? He wouldn't talk. Nobody would talk. Finally, one guy came to another one. Finally, one of the barbers, so-called barbers, says, turn around this way, and he turned the other way. He says, you see this table in this, all different uniforms, striped uniforms, a pair of pants, and a pair of jacket, and a mitzvah, and a shirt. That's going to be now your clothing, and now you're going to get into a certain camps, and now your fight for survival will start. My friends, I'm going to speak to you tonight. I chose to speak about 2 incidents that happened during my 4 concentration camps during the Churban Europe. One incident is I have in my book about the story of a bird. And the other one is that I'm going to speak to you about my access to fire, while I was in Melk already in the 3rd concentration camp. The story with the bird is as follows. All the children always ask me, Mr. Stark, did you really have a bird? And I says, not really, but somehow I tell them, well, there is a story to it. Let me tell you a little bit about the story of the bird. When finally we arrived, after they marched us into Auschwitz-Birkenau, in Auschwitz I was sitting with my father for days after days, I would say probably maybe about a week's time. There was very little, the silence was deafening. We had very little discussion between me and my father, and very little discussion between other prisoners at the same time. And as I was sitting there, and they counted us about 5 times, 6 times a day, we had to line up in rows of 5, 5, 5, and they counted us over and over again, but then they led us to disembark. And I was sitting once with my father, and I got very despondent. I started crying, and he says, why are you crying, Srulik? And I says, well, there is plenty of reason to cry. But also, I told him, look here, I told my father, I'd like to see some life here in this forsaken place. I smell death all over. I would like to see a little ant crawling out on my knee or my shoe. I would like to see a worm come out through the soil of the wet soil. I don't see any other life here. I'd like to see some form of life, whether it's an insect, whether it's anything else. And he says, I wish I could help you. Suddenly, as I'm telling him about this, my wishes, I look up and I see a beautiful bird on a branch in Auschwitz on the tree. And I'm looking at that bird, and I finally turn to my father, and I tell him, you see that bird? I see finally alive, something which is alive here. I says, that bird is my friend. That bird is always going to be my friend. That bird is always going to be with me. Wherever I go, that bird is coming with me. And as I pointed out about that bird, I certainly said, that bird is going to be with me. And I said to the Ribono Shel Olam, you have created that bird. You have given that bird the wings that he can fly. It can fly in and out of this forsaken place. That bird doesn't have to worry about the electric wires. That bird doesn't have to worry about a gun facing it every minute. I says, Ribono Shel Olam, you created that bird and you gave it wings. Ribono Shel Olam, I'm also your creation. You also created me. Why? I don't have any wings, and I don't expect that I'm going to be able to fly out of here. But Ribono Shel Olam, please take me under your wings. At least give me the protection and promise that you will protect me and you'll help me to survive this ordeal. This is the first time, my friends, that I've also taken the Ribono Shel Olam. I've taken him into partner with me. And I said, look here, I'm not the bird. I don't have wings. But I'm also your creation, just like that bird is. So consequently, I says, you gave all this the protection. You're giving this protection to your bird. I'm also your creation. So give me also your protection. Help me to survive, Ribono Shel Olam. And this is, my friends, the first time that I've taken in partnership the Ribono Shel Olam. And I had established the emunah that, and I will tell you something. There were about 4 times where my life almost ended in the 4 camps. A second from ending. 4 times. And each time, somehow by nissim and influence, I managed to be saved. How I managed to be saved is, of course, I have written about it, and I told people about it, how I managed to be saved, but I was saved. How? I don't understand. I don't understand it at Hayom, how this, in the last minute, when most people wouldn't survive, I survived. But the minute it happened, every time it happened 4 times to me, and each time I thought, Ribono Shel Olam, you maybe you heard me. Maybe you are giving me the protection that I asked, that you should give me at least whatever that creature had, that bird. So give me that protection. And every time nissim and influence happened, I felt more encouraged. Maybe, just maybe, I'm going to survive. Maybe I'm able to go and live through this ordeal every day that we faced, and we faced every day terrible ordeal. And of all the ordeals that we faced, the worst one was, of course, hunger. I cannot tell you what hunger is. Went to sleep every night hungry, and we constantly talked only about food and so forth. That was constantly going on. But nevertheless, I don't know whether speaking about what my mother used to cook for Shontov, or what she made, or what we had there between my friends, I don't know whether it any way helped to still the pains of hunger. Maybe even worse, maybe it somehow, I think, increased the juice of the digestive system and so forth. But nevertheless, I think that it was something that every time something like this happened, I said, maybe Ribono Shel Olam, maybe you did listen to me. And this is one thing about the bird. But then I adopted the bird more or less, and I felt that the bird is constantly with me. Whenever they loaded us up again in freight cars to let's say, to take that to Mauthausen, and from Mauthausen to Milk, I always pictured that bird is sitting right on top of that freight car and watching Yisrael and watching me, what happens to me, and so forth, and be my friend. So this is, in a nutshell, the story about the bird. The other thing that I wanted to speak to you also shortly, briefly I would say, is about the fire. I mentioned that I had access to fire. While finally, from Mauthausen, unfortunately in Mauthausen, I was separated from my father. I didn't see him again. And we were separated there and so forth. But after Milk, I ended up myself. But fortunately in Milk, which was the 3rd concentration camp that I was brought to, there I already got a job. What was my job? My job was as the Spitzenträger, the carrier of the pointers. What are the pointers? Most of the prisoners worked in digging further and further, advancing into a tunnel on a mountain and building deeper and deeper, and there were conveyor belts going into the tunnels, and prisoners were shoveling the debris that some of these prisoners were drilling through from the walls of the mountain. All this debris, fortunately, it wasn't stones. It was basically sand and pebbles, and they were shoveling it into on top of this conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt carried it out. So basically, they used, in order for us, for the prisoners to advance into the tunnels further and further, they used these air hammers and so forth. Like you see sometimes, even today, somebody is drilling into the street, preparing it with an air hammer. So these require certain steel pointers, but after a while, these steel pointers became dull. They did not perform the job as originally the intention was for them to perform. So I had to collect those steel pointers and take them out, bring them out from the tunnels to the blacksmith who was outside attending a big fire, a nice, with coal, charcoal, and so forth. There was a fire constantly going. And I gave him over those pointers, and he of course, heated them up red hot, and then he hammered them into points again. And after they were cooled off, my job was to take the finished ones and bring them back into the tunnels where the prisoners were working and distribute the finished product to them. But nevertheless, that gave me a chance that I had access to fire. Nobody else had access to fire. As I mentioned before, we didn't have any calendars, pencils, papers, watches, nothing. We had, of course, as I mentioned in my book, of course, we had coupled calendars. Fortunately, coupled calendars, as I described, was a computer, a live computer, and any prisoner, for some reason or other, that he wanted to know when Asura B'Tevis is, or when when Tisha B'Av is, or when Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is, for some reason, not that they were able to feel that we were able to in any way pray together or celebrate together. And that's the it took. But again, that wasn't on anybody's mind. But nevertheless, if somebody wanted to know, you have to ask couple. Couple never made a mistake, because many times, couple once there was also by accident that our camp was bombed, and there was a certain day, and the couple said that was on the day of Sheusar B'Tammuz, and then go in to here in Yerushalayim to Yad Vashem and say, when was Melk bombed? When the bomb fell on the barracks in Melk, and you'll see it was on the day of Sheusar B'Tammuz. So consequently, he never made a mistake. So, but me having access to that fire was a tremendous advantage. Why? What was a tremendous advantage? Because I didn't have anything, but sometimes prisoners came to me and said, Srulik, I found a rotten potato. Or somebody, a prisoner came, I found a bone. And I'll tell you, would you put the bone or the rotten potato on the coal, on the fire? Because once it was singed, it tasted a little better. We could probably more digested whatever was left in the digestive system. And the bone, if it was singed and by fire and burned a little bit, it was easier to take it in between your teeth and get some powder out of it. Anyhow, besides that, a lot of prisoners came who had a cigarette. And I'll tell you, a cigarette was like a fortune. We didn't have any money amongst us or anything else. But if somebody managed somehow to get a cigarette, he could buy for a cigarette, he could buy another portion or 2 portions of bread. So you'll ask me later on, how was it possible to get somebody to sell you that bread? That's a different story. But nevertheless, if he was. So a lot of them prisoners came and lit their cigarette near that fire because there was no other, nobody had matches and so forth. But the biggest part was that people brought me these things to put on there, whether it was a dead bird, whether it was a bone, as I mentioned before. But I'll tell you, the biggest thing was that I think that Rabbi Orlofsky is paying me back for this. I will tell you, as a little boy, we had a neighbor who was a druggist. You know what a druggist? He didn't use drugs. He was somebody that had an apotheker. He had a drugstore. And in Europe, a drugstore only sold drugs, my friend. Drugstore didn't sell milk or bread or sugar. That was it. Only drugs were allowed in that place. And he was a neighbor of ours, and once I heard him say that a lot of the people who come down with dysentery, that the biggest remedy or refuah for dysentery was charcoal powder. And they had in the drugstore in Munkac, where they were selling packages of charcoal powder, for any people that never suffered from that particular machla. So I heard about it, so I said to myself, Ribbono Shel Olam, maybe I can do something. Why? Because a lot of prisoners came down, but the biggest problem was for dysentery. And some were so bad that they couldn't hold it anymore. Their stomach just couldn't function, and they ended up in the so-called revier, so-called hospital. Many of them, who were even my dear friends, unfortunately checked in with that machla to the hospital, and they never checked out. I don't remember one person who ever went into that so-called revier who ever came out from there. So I decided, and I said to my friend, the blacksmith, and I told him, would you allow me to take a piece of wood and have it burned real flaming hot, and then I cooled it off, and I had a little aluminum spoon that I always carried with me in case I get some soup or something, and after it got cooled off and it got cold, I scraped off the powder of that burned piece of wood, but I have a big problem. I didn't have anywhere to package it. I didn't have where to put it in. So finally, the blacksmith gave me a very good answer. He says, you see that pond in the back? It has some big leaf over the water. Why don't you go and tear some of the leaves off, and you can package it in part of the leaves, tear off some of the leaves and package it in there. And I listened to him. And I packaged that powder. Every time I could scrape off some, package it, and I started distributing it to some prisoners that were also suffering from that machla. My friends, I can't tell you how many came to me and said, Srulik, you don't know what you did for me. I feel so much better today. My stomach is functioning again, and so forth. So you see, I didn't say to the Ribbono Shel Olam, look here, give me some credit for it. But I was so happy that this is part of the thing that was enabling the fire that I was access to was enabling to do also this to the prisoners. I will tell you, I will touch very briefly for a moment on liberation. Liberation has been a very, very interesting time, very complicated time. And I will tell you something. I sometimes, when it comes to liberation, I can speak for a few hours about just how liberation took place in the fourth camp in Ebensee. But needless to say, I will tell you only one thing. I sometimes, according to my opinion, my private opinion, I sometimes compare the parallel of liberation for us prisoners. Sometimes I compare it to Mamad Har Sinai. How do I compare it to Mamad Har Sinai? I remember many times before Shavuos, sometimes I quote Rabbi Orlofsky. I told him, why did Ribbono Shel Olam have to hold over us the heavens like a chugas, like a barrel? Well, I mean, it said, all these questions Rabbi Orlofsky raised once, and I quote him every time before Shavuos, because I have yortzeit for my mother usually a few days before Shavuos. So when I speak, I quote him when I speak about Shavuos, about Matan Torah. So I will tell you, but I wasn't so. First of all, the most important thing as far as the liberation was concerned, as soon as the Americans arrived, food, food, food. That's all we wanted. There was the most, and we could sell our lives. I would be glad. I told my friends I would sell gladly my life to be shot tomorrow morning. But if I could only have once in my life, I could have as enough bread to eat as I want. So anyhow, but the Americans made a very big mistake. They came in and they brought in some field kitchens, army field kitchens on the Pelplatz, which was the open place. They opened up the kitchen and they started serving some, I would say, bacon and some fat and meat with rice together. Many prisoners lined up with their things, and finally, and they started gobbling it up, and many of them dropped dead. And I said to my friends, it's impossible that Americans are poisoning us, but I will tell you something. As much as our lives depends on that little food today, as much as we want to eat, I would like to advise you, don't take part in that food. And they didn't. And then, and as I mentioned before in my book, as this went on, I finally noticed in about maybe 100 yards or 100 or a certain distance away, another line standing. And I figured, what are they giving away over there? What is in that line? And I said to my friends, listen, I think we cannot partake in that food. That's poison. We have to see, maybe they're giving away something in that other line. And as we were approaching that line closer and closer, I finally saw the Chusterav, Rabbi Shia Greenwald, who was also a prisoner in our camps. Rabbi Shia Greenwald was standing there with a parrot and a torn shalyat in his hand, and everybody lined up, and all my friends would realize finally standing in that line. And finally, I said to my friends, let's also stand in the line and make a brucha over that shalyat. And I was standing, and my turn came, and he handed to me that torn shalyat, and I made a and I remembered the last time I put on the tefillin in that barracks was the last time I put on the tefillin. That was it. And here is time of liberation. A moment we didn't satisfy our hunger yet, but yet already I was able to make a brucha of l'huniach al mitzvah tefillin over that torn and tattered shalyat. I describe more about that incident in the books. I don't want to go in anymore, but I will tell you something. Again, let me tell you that why do I say there's a parallel, in my own opinion, between Mamad Har Sinai and liberation? Because at Mamad Har Sinai, I think people said, Cholila said less than Velazdayan. You know, some of them said, yeah, I'll be a good Jew, but I don't want any of I will accept Torah Shebeksav, but I will not accept Torah Shebal Peh. That's not something that I want to appear to the mitzvahs that the Rebbunim and the Gedolim are going to come and say that we all have to complete part of life, part of Jewish life. So there were many different groups. So as we were standing in liberation, one group said, there couldn't be a God who would let us get through what we went through. There was another group says, hey, I'm not going to kill, I'm not going to murder, I'm going to honor my parents, but that's it. I don't want any other mitzvahs observed. But then the Rebbeinu Shalom send us wonderful shalichim. They send us like the Klosterberger Rebbe's Chisa Yugon Oleine, who came from another camp. He lost Nebuch, his entire family, but he came to us, and also Rab Silver from Cincinnati was there, and many other shalichim were there. And they told us, brothers and sisters, Rabboisai, if we want to go back, if we want to be a people that the world will recognize, if we want to back, if we want to have a native who have Torah and mitzvahs, then we have to go back to the Messiah of our parents and teachers gave us. Otherwise, we will not be able to exist. Sure enough, I'll tell you, without them, I don't know what would happen. The problem was, unfortunately, that we couldn't communicate with, let's say, our homes. Even after a while, the Americans changed the diet of what they were distributing to these prisoners for the field kitchens. Eventually, they changed to powdered milk and farina and oatmeal. That already we could digest, and that already we could finally take into our systems. So consequently, once our hunger was satisfied, our hunger was satisfied with this particular type of food that we could digest. What's our hunger? We started thinking, where's my Uncle Moshe? Where's my wife? Where's my husband? Where's my brother? Where's my sister? Where's my mother? Where is everybody? You couldn't take a phone and get a cell phone and call up. I'm calling Munkash. I'm calling Uzgarat. I'm calling Chuz. Hey, did Uncle Moshe come back? Did Tante Rivka come back? There was no such way of communication. There was only one way, and everybody knew it in his own back mind, in his own conscientious, that the only way to find out whether Uncle Moshe came back, and the only way to find out for me whether any of my family survived. After all, my sisters were younger sisters. I should have to get back to Munkash. To get back to Munkash, or get back to Chus, or get back to any other place, my friends, was not a easy task. It was almost an impossibility, because everything was destroyed, everything was bombed out, there was no communication, and there was no transportation, and nobody could, we only could travel maybe, I traveled on top of military transports, freight cars on the roof from there. They let me go up, a few of our boys to go out on the roof. That's the only way. So anyhow, I finally, we came back to, finally got back to Munkash through Prague and Budapest, where they gave us, each place they gave us more of religious articles, whether it was film, whether it was Sidurim, whether it was clothing, each one in Prague and in Budapest. And eventually we found our way back home to find out who returned, who didn't return. So once we were back home, usually it was before the Yom Tovim. It was 1945, before the Yom Tovim, and we were now under the Ukrainian government, and we were warned by some of the very, very high-ranking Russian officers who were part of the Russian army, who were situated there. They said, my friends, you're Jews, you are just got through from terrible ordeals and so forth. You came back. We want you to know that this place is going to be closed down, like even a fly won't be able to move out of here. So while you still can, we will give you permission to go out. People started going to DP camps. That's how they ended up in DP camps. Most of them were going for Aliyah Bet to Eretz Yisrael. And my friends, just to tell you that the Rebbeinu Shalom is Chazdei, again, Chazdei Hashem. The fact that we have today these wonderful Moises HaTorah. We have Kolelim in Chicago and in South Bend and in Milwaukee and in Lakewood. And here is all because they told us, you have to go back and you have to start again living according to the Messiah that your parents gave you. Rebbeinu Shalom helped us, and somehow we got back. And I'll tell you, no doubt, the fact that we have today all these Moises HaTorah, I don't want to go in all the different places, is because we listened to our tzaddikim, we listened to our guys, and we all went back to the Messiah of our parents. Thank you very much. I would like to open it up now for questions and answers.
So, one question that someone sent up front was that they noticed that, to their knowledge, you don't seem to have a tattoo. If they noticed correctly, why is that?
Well, just tell you briefly the reason why I don't have a tattoo, and 125,000 of other Hungarian prisoners didn't have a tattoo, is because that in 1944, around June or July, there was negotiation between Yamach Shemoy, the biggest Mach Shemoynik, the biggest killer, Reichman, was where he said, if you will manage to give us products for our military and so forth, for our people, that means for the German Reich, in the amount of $100 million, we will free 125,000 Hungarian prisoners. Without my knowledge, I happened to be in that group, and the command was from him not to tattoo this group, and they gave us, instead of a yellow triangle in our numbers, we had a red triangle, which indicated that we are political prisoners, not Jewish prisoners.
When the trains arrived in
Auschwitz.
Did the prisoners have any idea what the selection process was? What the two choices were? Did they know?
That question has to, I don't need it. That question has to put me back a little bit to the originally, when we were still at home. Many questions people ask me, what did you know? Did you know that an Auschwitz existed? Did you know the Scheiters that is going on in Galicia? Did you know of the Scheiters that is going on in Kamenets Podolsk? And all these things. And they asked us, and I heard, as I mentioned before, we didn't have any television. We didn't even have a radio. How did we get some news? The most of the news came through Shemuas, through different. Yankel said this, and Rab Yitzchak said this, and so forth. And I mentioned before, I loved the mikveh in Minkach, and I was, every Friday, I placed myself in the hot mikveh in a corner, and I listened to, Yankel came in and says, you know what I just heard? You know, and Moshe came in and said, Nechasel came in, you know what is going on? And I I absorbed all this information. And finally, after about a couple of hours soaking in that mikveh, I finally came home and I gave it all out. And I said to my parents, you know what I heard? You know what Haskell said? You know what Yitzchak said? And so forth. And they said, and sometimes I painted some very terrible pictures. And they said, that's impossible. It's impossible to believe. Anyhow, whether it was actually impossible to believe, it's not the issue. The issue is that everybody said, we cannot believe this, otherwise we would go. If we really believe that all the Scheiters that's going on in Galicia at that time, and was actually what went up in Galicia was not so much from the German Roschem, it was done from the Lithuanians, from the Estonians, from the Polacks, from the Ukrainians. These were the biggest. They did the I would say the shlichus of the Roschem very well. So I'm saying we did not want to believe that. It was impossible to believe that this is actually true. So we denied it, and so long till we eventually we faced it ourselves. Any other question? Yeah.
A lot of things have been written, a lot of different theories about the differences between people who survived and people who did not survive. And
in what way do you see a difference?
well, that's what I was going to ask you, is whether you have any theories.
Are you talking about being observant in mitzvahs, in the Maasiyas and so forth, or are you talking about between the relationship between one person and the other? In which way do you feel that there's a difference?
I don't know what I feel. I'm asking whether you, because of your experience, your observation, whether you ever had any theory, any thoughts about whether there was something.
I think she's asking, what did you observe among the prisoners around you?
No, that's not what she's asking. She's asking after that, after liberation.
Well, are you asking during the time in the camps or afterwards?
I'm asking an open question.
Okay.
I'd like to go in that direction, whatever he would like to share.
Okay.
Okay, the answer is basically that I will tell you something. There are, when it came after so to speak, after liberation, and after we settled in the DP camps, and some people went to Eretz Yisrael and Aliyah Bet and so forth. Whatever, life started somehow getting back to semi-normal, because we didn't immediately be able to enjoy and feel that we have a normal life. But nevertheless, that was the idea. What do you think the DP camp served? The DP camp served that here is a group of whoever wants to come called Dichfin Yesei V'Yechel. Anybody that wants here, we will give you food. We'll give you food for Shabbos. We'll give you protection. You will be able to observe your mitzvahs. You'll be able to read a new things which is written by religious people. I mean, somehow life started to come back. I'll tell you something. Even in the DP camp where I was, we organized already on Purim. We organized a Purim spiel with the Yosef Atzadik and so forth, just to get back to they were shiurim and so forth. So that was part of getting back to normal life. And whether everybody was also trying to whether religious or non-religious, we were all basically in the same situation. And people were nice to each other, whether you were observant, whether you were shomer mitzvahs or not. Yeah.
Reb Stark, thank you so much for sharing.
I'm not a rabbi, that's okay.
How did you practice Jewish life in the camps before you were liberated? What did that look like?
Okay, I practice life. I'll tell you something. I was in 4 different concentration camps. And in all this time, in all the 4 camps, I can tell you only one thing. Very, very seldom did I notice somebody standing aside and davening the Shemoneh Esrei. I almost never noticed that. Very seldom did I say, Strulek, we need you for minyan, which is going to be in that corner, and I want you to show up there. No, there was no such thing. You have to realize there was absolutely no religious practice going on in the camps itself. Why? Because nobody would even in mind. There was no time to think about it. Mostly what was important is just to still the hunger pains. That was it. But nevertheless, there were individuals who did maybe practice b'yachidus, maybe individuals who were standing the Shemoneh Esrei a b'tzinner, nobody could see them, maybe something this. And every time we did check with couple when Yontif is coming up, not that anybody was able to do something. There was one time a friend of mine managed to make a sukkah in under the circumstances, and he invited me to share the sukkah with him, which I describe in my book, and so forth. And I also talk about it sometimes, but I can speak about I don't know how many different subjects, different incidents. And also, one time we came back from work in the evening, and we were getting ready. They gave us our soup, whatever we got every day. And suddenly, I see people were whispering to each other, whispering going around. And I say to my friends, "Would you find out what's going on? Some whispering going on." He says, "They just told me," he says, "it's Erev Yom Kippur." And I said, "What do you mean it's Erev Yom Kippur?" He says, it was verified by couple. It is no doubt it's Erev Yom Kippur. Anyhow, we went to sleep there every night, and I describe about the certain dreams that I had at that night, Erev Yom Kippur, and what took place in our barracks. I don't want to go in and give you the whole details. It'll take me too long.
We often hear about survivors having a hard time talking about their experiences. Were you able to speak to your children and others about what you went through?
Okay, a very good question. I'll tell you. Yes. When I came to Chicago in 1948, And I came to New York in 1947. I was with quite a few friends that were also went through this whole ordeal. And in Chicago, I used to meet many other survivors who were not necessarily in the same Saviba, in the same camp I was, on the same camp. They were in different, there were so many different, and somehow, I will tell you something, everybody, any survivor that lived through, the period of the Churban, that time, has his own Nissim and Nefluas, has his own story. They are not two alike. But all of them are important because all of them are Nissim and Nefluas. Without that, people who were in hiding, and people who were in hiding in by farmers, by goyim, and people who you have to realize that when it came time to liberation, that these Roshim didn't want many of these camps to fall in the hands of the liberators, whether it was Russian or it was American. So they had to either transfer them over, either by marching them for days and days to another place where it would be safe, not so close to the invasion of the Allied forces, and so forth. So many times they did this, and many times they took a lot of these prisoners and put them on open freight cars in the winter. It was in the height of the winter, and shuttled them back and forth till half of them froze to death, or half. But went on as don't ask. So some survived, some didn't survive, but maybe that's what went on. And I'll tell you something. Many couldn't speak about it. Many couldn't speak about their experiences. Many couldn't speak about this. Many told me, yeah, my father is speaking to the family. Many could speak to the children. Many couldn't speak to the children either, and some spoke only to a very, very, I think, very, very, very individuals that for some reason or other they wanted to share with. But generally, I will tell you, there were different types of approaches. Some people couldn't. For some reason, I am thankful to the Rabbi Orlofsky that he gave me the idea, Sulek, you have to speak about it. Why? Because it is important, not only on Purim time, but it's like every day. According to many Meforshim, it's a mitzvah to remember every day about Musalach. So far, I'm saying I had no problem, Baruch Hashem, talking about it. Maybe I talk too much sometimes about it. But nevertheless, it's important. Why? Because I feel you have to remember. And a lot of you, maybe there's some young ladies here who are how to have mothers of future generations. It's important, it's your duty to inform these future generations what went on in Europe. Yeah, there, somebody said.
2 questions.
Yes.
First question, you said you were in a group that was defined by Eichmann as political prisoners in exchange for money.
Right.
Why was that group not released?
That was what?
Why was the group not released?
Because they couldn't come up with $100 million. They couldn't come up with $100 million. Not Mark Sheff, several $100 million. This was Eichmann's request. You gave us for, I don't know how many millions of dollars, soap, cocoa, cigarettes, medications, all this, and it was several $1 million, and we couldn't come up with $100,000. The Hungarian, I think, who were in charge of the Hungarian Judenrat. That's why. So that's the first answer is.
But you did get redefined as a different group.
What then?
The group was still redefined as political prisoners and not as Jewish prisoners.
No, they remained in the camp, but they didn't change. They didn't change any of their numbers anymore. That's remained untattooed. They would not tell them now that the deal is off. Now we have to tattoo them. They never got tattooed, and they remained that way.
The deal was half done, but not completed.
Right. There was a deal did not take place. There was not. So it's you say I'm telling you if you do this and this, I'm going to go do this for you. But if the deal doesn't take place, I'm saying what happened and so forth, it still remains. So that tzibui that the Mach Shemoyne gave, that 125 prisoners should not be tattooed and they should not have the insignia of Jewish prisoner, that remained till liberation. Second question.
Yeah, second question is, why do you think some survivors can talk about their experiences and some can't?
Well, that is already the nature of a person himself. It's like, you understand, even in natural life and what's happening, there are people who will sit in a shiur with a Maggid shiur, and let's say whether it's a Daf Yomi or whether it's another Gemara, and some people would say, "Oh, I got to ask you this question. I got to ask this. This is what I'm wondering about." Some people would say quietly and never, even though they may have questions in their mind that they're wondering about, but they don't have the courage maybe to come out and say, "Rebbe, I have this and this question about this particular Mamar Chazal. Can you give me an answer?" Yeah. Maybe some will do it and some will not want to do it. That's the nature of some people. That's it.
Can I answer something? Can I say something on what he said?
I can't hear what she said.
Can she say something about this?
Yeah, go ahead.
My mother was in Auschwitz. She told me that she didn't want us to know anything. And I've read it other places, they wanted to put it in the past. They wanted to give children a good growing up, a nice childhood. Wasn't until they were grandchildren that my mother had the urge to tell them. But the way I understood it from her was, she wanted to make us a nice life.
Can I ask you a question? Do you yourself, were you agreement with this? Were you feeling that this was the right thing?
I only found out when I was about 10, let's say. I got very into it, but I knew it was Yehareg B'al Yavor. We could not ask my mother anything. But my mother felt, I think she truly believed, that by keeping quiet, we didn't know anything. She thought we knew nothing, okay? And I don't know, but the book came out by Helen Epstein, The Children of the Holocaust. You know that book?
Yes.
It says when the article came out in the New York Times, all these survivors' children put the article in their closets, under their bed. They were hiding it. And I said, I've got mine in the closet. And my mother could not believe it, because it was in the air. It was just in the air.
What is your name?
My name is Elvie. Whitney Steinmetz.
Okay, Steinmetz?
Yeah.
I'll tell you something. I just can't tell you how important is what you brought up. Because here we see an example of a situation where a mother said, I will protect my children. I protect my children in order not to tell them what happened in the Churm Europe, what happened to me, what happened to your grandparents, what happened to your great-grandparents. They all perished. I want to keep it for my children. It's something that they should not know. That was her approach. There are other approaches? No. My personal approach was always, no, I have to go and speak to people. I have to tell them, I have to tell girls in Moises HaTorah, in schools, in high schools, in Beis Yaakov's, in other schools in Chicago and in Milwaukee and in South Bend. I have to tell them that they are the mothers of future generations, and it's their duty to tell the children what happened. Why? Because we have to be constantly on guard. It should Chalila not happen again. And we are going to be on guard. We just leave it go. People could, unfortunately, some Rishua might stand up and give us problems again.
But she opened up to the grandchildren many years later.
She did open up to the grandchildren?
Grandchildren, I think it was us.
Yeah, but that was already much later, right?
Yes, much later.
In her life.
She started telling me.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
First, thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
I can't hear you.
Thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
Don't mention it.
And sharing your story. I have two questions, but I'll start with one. We'll get back around. Everyone in life goes through great challenge. And given your life experience, what is your advice for people as they're going through hardship in order to go on to build a beautiful life and not let their challenge define them?
Is this two questions or one?
One.
One question. I'll tell you what I usually tell people and what myself I have taken upon myself. And I said to myself, Srulik, I said, look here, there are certain things you have no control over it. You have absolutely no control over it. For instance, if I sit at the airport and I'm supposed to take a plane to Chicago, and suddenly they tell me that plane is canceled and will not go out anymore, and you have to find lodging for the night. I mean, there are people who go around saying, curse and say, but this so happened, and they will not stop really using profane language and so forth. I sit down, I said, is it my control? Can I help it? No. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. My advice has always been, things that you have no control over it, don't aggravate yourself. Because you have but things that happen because later on you feel, I did have control, but I didn't speak up, I didn't do anything, I didn't help this man, I didn't help this woman, and so that's a different story. But I'm saying, but usually when you feel that you have no control over anything, don't aggravate yourself. Otherwise, this is my advice. Any other question? Yeah, in the back over there.
Mine is an optional question, and I just wanted also to thank you for coming to speak.
A little louder.
Yeah.
Okay. Given that the Holocaust led in large part to the founding of the State of Israel, and again, this is an optional question, and because the State of Israel is in the middle of one of the longest wars, or the longest war, what is your, if you can, opt to share your opinion on service in the army?
What are the thumbs of a question?
What is your feeling about serving in the Israeli army today, in light of current events?
Are you kidding? This is such an important part of life here. Who do you think, who do you think is protecting all the people, all the Moises HaTorah, whether religious or non-religious? Who is protecting them? Who is? This is the Israeli army who are carrying the uniform, the Israeli uniform. They are protecting us. But they are going after Roshim that killed Jews in during the games of the sport games and so forth. No, they hunting down all these, and eventually they're killing them what they deserve. So you have to understand that living in Israel, do you know what it means here? Do you know what it means to have the protection and the army here? I know, as far as some Gedolim are concerned, the problem is the girls' army and the boys' army, and sometimes they mix, sometimes they don't mix. I understand all this. I understand these important questions and reservations. But nevertheless, all in all, we have to have a strong Israel in order for the world to know and have a respect for Jews all over.
Can I say something?
We're gonna go to this side real quick. Go ahead, Steve.
I have no problem. I can be here till midnight. Yeah.
Loud.
Tzvi Himmelman.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question. When you were in the camps before liberation, were you more likely thinking or dreaming, if I got out of here, if I survive? Or were you more likely thinking or dreaming, when I get out of here, when I survive? And what were you thinking for a future, if or when? What will I do with my life?
But you raised a very important question, but it requires more than one answer. First of all, it's not a question that I many times I didn't have time to think about what's going to happen if I survive. Because why? Because the hunger pains took precedent over anything else. Somehow, constantly you had to fight. Many times you were sitting with your friends and talking about what my mother used to cook and what they used to make. Maybe it was still our hunger, but it didn't. And actually, that was prevented anybody from thinking anything else. But I'm saying, did I think at all? I did know one thing. I think, as I mentioned before, there are 4 times where my life almost ended, and it didn't end. And somehow I came back to the thoughts when I saw that bird, and I said, Ribono Shel Olam, you created that bird, and you gave it wings, and that bird can go in and out of this dreaded place with the electric wires and so forth. But I cannot do that. I'm confined here. I am enclosed in this place, and my life is in danger. But nevertheless, I'm also your creation. I'm also part. I don't know why there was a Hester Ponem. I don't know why we are going through this. I'm not questioning that. I said to the Ribono Shel Olam. But all I know is that I says, hey, I'm not questioning it, but if I survive, please, I'm also your creation to help me to survive. And every time, as I said, when my life almost ended, and I'm Nissim Nefluas, it didn't, I felt, yes, I think maybe the Ribono Shel Olam listened to me. And it happened after the 3rd and 4th time. I felt, maybe I am destined to survive. But you don't say, I'm now relying on this. When Nefluas, the Ribono Shel Olam is gonna see that I have to do something. What do I have to do? I still have to do my trying to limber up, trying to exercise, trying to help each of my friends help each other by morning, sometimes washing our bodies with cold water. But still, we have to do whatever is possible to maintain the physical health as long as possible. But nevertheless, I had simonim that just maybe, the Ribono Shel Olam is going to help me to survive yet. Yes.
Thank you for speaking so clearly.
Thank you.
We see all over the world the last 2 years marches, pro-Palestinian marches, and in my mind, unfortunately, Holocaust survivors marching alongside against the, as they say, genocide that Israel has been carrying out. Have you had an opportunity to speak to any fellow survivors on this? And what is your opinion on why they march?
If I understand your question correctly, you're asking me whether we had any comments between me and my friends about what's going on in Gaza. Is that it?
She's saying that there are Holocaust survivors who seem to identify with the Gazans and feel that this is another genocide. And I can't believe there are too many of them still alive.
There are Holocaust survivors who are saying that what the Israelis are doing is the same thing as the Nazis.
There's Holocaust survivors who have been saying that?
Yes. That's what she's saying. She's saying there are these marches, and the Holocaust survivors come out and say Israel's like the Nazis and they're killing the Palestinians.
Which Holocaust survivors? Where and when did they make that statement?
In London.
In London?
Yeah.
Well, there are Meshiguim all over the world. I mean, how can you control a Meshiguim who says something like that and makes a comparison?
What about the Goyim? What about the Goyim that are saying that we're exactly like the Israeli army are like the Nazis and they're killing people and this and that? What's your opinion?
What was the exact question? Did he?
There are lots of
He's asking, do you have an opinion about Goyim who compare Israel to genocide? You know.
Well, I'll tell you something. As far as Goyim are concerned, I have had contact in America. I've had with being in business for 60 years and 65 years. I've had contact with a lot of non-Jewish customers, very, very prominent people in business and so forth. I don't think that anybody ever has compared something like that or mentioned anything like that. So I'm saying that this now. I heard that there is such a thing that happened here in Israel. That there are some people who made that comparison. I don't know. Somebody can compare this glass of water to a river. You have no control over these things. But generally, I will tell you, I've had the contact with many non-Jews. In America, I'm not going back now at my youth. Before the war in Munkach, I was 12, 13 years old, and of course we experienced as from the Ukrainians who lived among us, and from the some of the non-Czechoslovakian youth, we could experience some anti-Semitism, but never anything from the Czechoslovakian background, or for the Czechoslovakian schools, or for the Czechoslovakian individuals. They were the most democratic country, I think, before the war in Europe. And not only were they a most democratic country, as far as Masaryk was concerned, there was the Czech president, but they also were, I would say, probably one of the most influential and richest country in production, in technical production. Their Škodas were coming out even when very few cars were available before the war. So I'm saying the Czechs were a different people, and the Slovaks were a different people. The Slovaks were already, I imagine, Catholic people, and of course, as I said, when I was a young boy, well, we had problems from the Ukrainians, we had problems from some of the Russians, we had some problems from Ruthenians, but never from the Czech youth and so forth. So there were different people who came from different, I believe, beliefs and different backgrounds. That some felt that they have to give problems to Jews, and some didn't. Yes.
May I, if you don't mind? We're talking a lot.
What, you Yaakov? No.
I'm Yaakov. Yes. We're talking a lot about the war in Gaza, and with the release of the hostages, and you talked a lot about your liberation, and this is being recorded. I'm curious to know what you would tell the hostages who have just been liberated. Some words of chizuk or anything, if they were to see this.
Well, there were probably many similarities that the hostages went through, that we went through. Part of it was probably the constant hunger pains. I'm sure that they never gave them enough food to the satisfaction of the, no, I have eaten a full meal. That's one of it. So, but and as far as whether they, to what extent they still hate them, and what extent they hated them at the time when they were under their thing is all something which I don't know. I have to speak to them. I'll tell you only one thing. People ask me, do I hate the Germans? Do I dislike them? And my answer is as follows. First of all, the Germans of today are not, this generation of today in Germany are not the ones that killed my parents, my grandparents, and men, women, and children. This is already a new generation, a new phase.
How many? 3 generations.
What?
Today, is it 3 generations later? Is it 4 generations later?
I think it's at least 2, maybe more, because these. I remember when I right after the war, after I was liberated, I was tell you I went to visit with my sisters. I went to visit an aunt in Vienna, and that was in 1946. No, 1940, end of 1946, and her husband, who was she was married to somebody that I finally learned. He took me. He says, "Izzy, would you like to go to bath?" They had very famous different baths in Vienna, hot and cold and lukewarm and so. So I finally says, "Agree to." So I went with him. He took me to some bath, and I see Also, some civilians were also using those baths. And I look at these Germans who were also using them, and I say, I wonder how many people did you kill? How many people did you kill? Who, so forth. But I'm saying that was in 1940, end of 1946. But it's now 2000 and what? 25. 2025. Can you say the same thing? No, I don't hate them, and so forth. And there are individual people. I will tell you. I never told you about. There were some Germans during who were my guards who were trying to sometimes help me. Sometimes one gave me every time, handed me an apple. Sometimes a guy handed me a sandwich or a piece of bread. A German guard who was standing near me with the gun, and so forth. And there was a case where I was. I will tell you just briefly that my milk was situated in a valley, so to speak, and was surrounded by barracks of the Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe was the German Air Corps, and of course they were surrounded our camp, but they were not instrumental in guarding us. They were not our tormentors, so to speak, not the Luftwaffe people. But nevertheless, they were close to us. One afternoon, I think it was late maybe in I don't know, it was late in the year. I walked down. We had a rule in our concentration camp. Whenever we walk down the street and a German soldier or German officer is coming towards us, we have to stop, not move, and wait till he passes us, and take off our hat. And once he passes us, we can continue walking. So I was walking down once in Melk on the afternoon, and I look in a distance and I see, oh Gewalt, this officer coming towards me. He must be a general. He had a fur collar with this German cross here and medals all over. Tremendous, beautiful uniform. And as I stop in my tracks like usual, and I take off my mitzvah, and he approaches me, and he passes me by about maybe 8 yards from me, and he stops. And I felt I had usually, when they pass me, I can start walking. This is why he says, "Halt mal aus." He says, "Hold, don't move." Suddenly went through my mind, well, what is my sin now? What did I do? What is he going to do? So he's standing about maybe 8 feet from me, facing that way, and I'm standing there, and he says to me, "Can you hear me?" He says, and I says, "Jawohl." And he says, "Es wird nicht mehr lange dauern." He said, "It will not last much longer. Halt mal aus." He says, "Hold out much longer. It will not last much longer." This is the first time, because we didn't have any sort of news. But I will tell you something. The minute I'm standing there and I figure, am I really hearing this, or is this imagination? And as he left, I started running to my barrack, not walking, running. And I come there and I say, "Come on, my friends, I want to tell you what happened to me." And I tell them exactly what happened with all the details. And they say, "Srulik, stop hallucination. Stop your dreams." I says, "Please, believe me, it happened." And I am telling you the truth. No, I don't think they ever believed. In fact, after liberation, some of my friends...
How long afterwards was liberation?
What? Even after liberation, I told them again, I says, "I want to tell you, remember what I told you? It's not a hallucination. I think I wasn't crazy. It was real. This is what I heard. And this is what he told me, this big guy." And so you see, something like this happened also. What did you want to say?
Is it a couple of months before?
Before liberation?
Yeah.
How far between that and liberation? How far between?
I would say, no, it happened in Melk, and then they took us to Ebensee. It must have been about at least 5 months or so before liberation. Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, you were talking about a few places you were transferred. You were in Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland and then 3 places in Austria. What, according to, let's say, your knowledge, why would they transfer people all the time? So many different places, and you were in so many different camps. And also, if you could just give us a little bit of information in terms of what was going on in those other 3 camps in Austria. How was that different than Birkenau?
Duty, what is it? I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
I'm sorry, can you repeat it one more time? Because I got distracted. I apologize.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were transferred, you were in 4 different camps. And so I'm just curious why, according to what you think, why would they transfer people so many different places?
Why were you transferred so often?
Yeah, what was like
Auschwitz
that?
wasn't your last stop. You were transferred to Mauthausen, then Melk. Why were you transferred so often?
Poland to Austria.
Okay.
And also, if you could just tell us a little bit about those 3 other camps in Austria.
Okay, first of all, Mauthausen was a terrible, terrible camp. Mauthausen was the camp where they issued my number, but Mauthausen was also a distribution camp. You can imagine that there were many thousands of Hungarian prisoners that, I call them prisoners, of Hungarian people that came in these transports that were destined to go to work. Now, they had many different situations, many different little towns had different type of industry that was working for the German Reich, whether it was for airplanes, making parts for airplanes, or whether it was working by the railroad, or whether it was laying rails, and so forth. So this Mauthausen distributed all these prisoners that came in, and including my father, who was one of those transports, to different satellite places, where each satellite place had a concentration camp that was working for the German Reich to achieve victory, so to speak. So consequently, we were all, many of them were this. Now, the reason why they transferred so many camps, including ourselves, let's say from Melk to Ebensee, because the Russian army was approaching Melk from, because we were close to Vienna, about maybe 60, 70 miles or 100 kilometers from Vienna. The Russians were approaching, and they did not want us to be liberated by either by the Russian army or by the English or American army. So they consequently kept on taking, as soon as these Allied armies approached during the war, they approached those camps, they emptied them out and shipped them to another place, or in many cases they killed them. In many cases they put them on open freight cars in the wintertime and shoveled them back and forth just so they froze. Many of them froze to death and so forth. So there were many other ways that those Rotzchim found somehow to empty out the camps, not for us to fall into the armies of liberation. So I will tell you something. Even in Ebensee, I would say, I wake up one morning from my bunk, and I look out again, and I turn to my friends and I say, something changed. And they said, what are you talking about, Srulik? And says, look out. You see the guard tower there? The guard tower guy was standing always with a machine gun. That guard tower is now some civilians with white bands on there. What's going on? I started to figure out, and I said to my friends, you know, it's quite possible that we are close to the end of the war, to liberation. And sure enough, I will tell you something, sure enough, one day, about 5 days before we were liberated by the Americans, 5 days before, they told us again to appear on the Appellplatz. This time it was different. Why? Usually when they counted us on the Appellplatz, people who were somehow dying in the hospital, they let them sit there. People who were so weak that they couldn't come out into the Appellplatz and be counted, they left them there in the barracks. So this time, everybody had to come out, everybody. There was one guy. They counted us over and over and over again. There was one guy who was missing. One guy was my friend, who later on we were together in Chicago. He was originally from Pressburg. He was actually originally learned in Pressburger Yeshiva, and we were very good friends. He also settled in Chicago, and he told me where he was hiding that moment when they counted us over and over again. Eventually, they told us one thing, which we never heard before from any of the German Raschim. And we had to listen in many different languages. They told us that the war is near here, and there is a possibility that many of us will will get hurt during the fighting, because it says the German army is ready to repel the onslaught of the Allies, and pretty soon there will be victory. So, but nevertheless, we should not be in the middle of the fight. So they would advise us we all should go into the tunnels and hide in the tunnels that we build over there. And eventually, like B'yad, B'Shem Achas, with one name we all said, Loi with an Aleph. Loi, no way will you get us schleppers into those tunnels, we don't go. And they didn't have any more a tremendous amount of forces because they were all already tried to escape from the Allies. So, of course, we didn't go into those tunnels. But when the Americans liberated us and they checked out those tunnels, they were all dynamited. And they all had one button to push, and boom, and everybody in those tunnels would not get out. So you see all the things that the Germans tried to do in the last moment of liberation. A few more questions.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for coming. I just want to ask a little bit about your life in Hungary before the war.
Czechoslovakia.
Was it Austria-Hungary?
No, it was Czechoslovakia.
Okay, I'd like to ask a little bit about your life in Czechoslovakia. The war had begun in Czechoslovakia, was overtaken by the time that you would have been bar mitzvah. So I just, what does a bar mitzvah look like in a Nazi-occupied country?
Well, I will tell you, we were actually not Nazi occupied, because that was part of the miracles but saved. Well, I should save the Hungarian Jews till 1944. You have to realize that when the Germans marched into Poland in 1939, end of 1939, beginning of 1940, and they started bombing the Gerre Hasidische Moisdes and so forth, so many Nebuch, there were so many Karbonis that fell from the Gerre Hasides, from the other Hasides, and so forth. So many Jews, Nebuch, were killed immediately. That did not happen by us. Why? Because we were occupied by the Hungarians. Why were we occupied by Hungarians? Because Germany came to Hungarian king and told them, look here, we are not going to occupy physically. We are not going to march in to Hungary like we marched in to Belgium and France and so forth. We are not going to leave you alone. But you have to start giving the Jews problems. You have to start taking away all their rights and so forth. So what did Hungary do? Sure, they started taking away our licenses. The lawyers could not be practice law. Doctors could not practice their profession and so forth, and started taking away all the different licenses and making life miserable. But one thing I can tell you, Rabbi Isai, the big thing was that we still, every night, whether it was hunger pains or no hunger pains, but we still went to bed in our own beds, to sleep in our own bodade. So that was a very, very important thing till, of course, the final moment when they schlepped us also away. But as my bar mitzvah took place, yes, I will tell you something. I don't remember even in the good times, I don't remember bar mitzvah boys in Munkach, besides having an aliyah, that they should read from the Torah, they should from all this was not. Usually they used to have give a kiddush. They used to have some schnapps with a cake and wisha, mazel tov, and so forth. One time when they made the biggest simcha was, I remember my parents made also the biggest simcha that they ever made for Shulek, for their little boy, when I started learning Chumash. Starting learning Chumash was the biggest party of all. So I remember that they made, they had about 17 barrels of beer that were consumed by people who were coming to the party of when I started learning Chumash. They put me on a pedestal and they asked, was lernt ha was a little boy learning? And I says, Vayikru. And I said, the Rebbe says, was ist das Vayikru? What does Vayikru mean? And I says, Rad geriefen. Where Rad geriefen? He called. But that's, so who called? And I had to explain all this, what Vayikru means. And then candies came down from the sky. It was really a wonderful time. So that was the biggest party that my parents ever made. The bar mitzvah was not. That was already. My mother. That was during the Hungarians already. During that time, when they took away all their rights and all their things, it was very difficult to buy something, or difficult to buy food and get food into the house. But my mother, she somehow managed to make a Shabbos. Sometimes she managed to get a chicken, or sometimes she managed even to get for the Purim, even a little duck that I took to the Shoyachet, to Shech. So basically, it was all, but still we were at home. Till this all changed in right Pesach, the day after Pesach, the Achron Shel Pesach, this whole thing changed when they told us you have 1 hour to pack and take whatever you can carry and leave your home. That was the last thing that finally we had to leave our homes. A few more, okay?
Yeah, we're going to do one more question on each side and then have any closing remarks you want to share with us, Mr. Stark, as you leave. So, yes.
Thank you for sharing with us. I'm sure we all agree that, as you said, that youth have to know about what happened. And I'm sure most people would agree that that's at a certain age, not young children. In Eretz Yisrael, I don't know what's in English, but I've seen comics, books in comics form about the Holocaust, about Eichmann Machmo. I heard more about Mordechai and Norgishel spoke very much against this. And once, I didn't read the books, but once I saw a very young boy reading this, and I said, you shouldn't read this. He says, why not? I said, you're too young. He said, what's the problem? I said, it's too sad for you to read at your age. He says, no, it's okay. The partisans came and saved everybody.
What's the question?
About these books, if the Bible,
He approves of the books,
are
that's
okay, and if not, why isn't there a protest by educational institutions or rabbis? The Holocaust is being misrepresented from children in these comics and from books.
So she's asking what your opinion is. There are some books today that express the Holocaust in comic book form, perhaps, and some of the information might be off or misrepresented. Am I repeating it correctly?
It's also for very young children. It's also for very young children.
Right. It's targeted for very young children.
There's no mileage to giving older children misinformation either.
There are some very greedy people that I understand that to make a buck or to make a few dollars here and there, a few shkolim, is so important that they will probably abandon what is morally right and so forth. They will use the Holocaust if necessary because it will create an attention, maybe create people. So they use the Holocaust in a certain way that they can profit from it, whether it's through some kind of a new story or maybe even a play based around it. The whole world is busy with the Holocaust. The whole world sometimes compares ridiculous situations to the Holocaust. You cannot help that. I cannot help it. It bothers me, but there's nothing I can do about it. If somebody comes out and profits from so-called the Holocaust situation, I cannot help it. But I'll tell you something. In as far as it's very important for me to tell you that I certainly had no problem in communicating. I had no problem and so forth. I feel it was very, very important. It is still very important. And the fact is, do you want me to close already, or do we still have questions?
One more question. There'll be one more question.
Okay.
You want to finish? Wait, I just want to add, I'm sorry if I can interrupt. If it's with your permission, add one thing. Just that's this is not a plug for Mr. Stark's book, but that's one of the reasons why he put his book forward. He felt there was not enough truthful representation of the Holocaust targeted for a younger audience. His book, if or when you have a chance to see it, is targeted from ages more or less 10 and up. It's targeted for tweens and teenagers, because he felt that group has been neglected and they haven't been represented with proper books. You have like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which isn't even factual, or Anne Frank, which is a different type of book.
You're right.
So that's why he put his book out into the world, because he wanted something that was factual, true, that represented the Holocaust through his eyes.
Let me tell you only one thing, that right now it's impossible for me to walk through on a Shabbos, a street of Chicago, when I go to shul, or I come out from shul, and I see all these children going in different directions. They all come up to me and says, "Oh, Mr. Stark, I read your book. Oh, hey, Mr. Stark, I couldn't put it down." And this one tells me that. And then a lot of people come to me and want a brocha from me. I said, "Look here, I'm not a Kohen. I cannot just give out brochas. The Rebbeinu Shalom didn't tell me that I should give brochas. But I say, maybe just if you want a brocha from me, fine. I hope the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to listen to me and give you what I plan or what I wish for you." So that is one of those things. But I'll tell you, if you want me to close already, I'll close it.
One last question. There's one last question. Right. One last question.
You can speak.
I know.
You can speak to him afterwards.
Go ahead. Last question.
Here. There's somebody here.
Yes, you are supposed to give brachas, because when the Satmar Rebbe came to Eretz, he said when he left, he said, "Who do we go to for a bracha now, Rebbe? You're leaving." He says, "Find a survivor who's still putting on tefillin, and that's who you're going to get a bracha." Right.
Was that Rabbi Orlofsky?
That's me. No, that was the Satmar Rebbe.
I will tell you something, Rabbi Orlofsky. I will tell you something. I remember very well at the beginning. I'm not an Odam Choshev. I'm an Odam. I'm a human being. Well, and how much I enjoyed. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed your shul. And I have to see you for a moment after this meeting. Why? Because I owe some money to Yeshua and I got to know how to pay it. I don't want to go back to Chicago with that guilt feeling.
Last question. Go ahead.
Okay, so from what I understand, you've been doing this for a while, for many years even, and you've been addressing many groups. And I was wondering two things. One, whether there was a particular question that stood out to you over the years that you thought was very good and perhaps that influenced people, that the answer influenced people, and how come you never get tired of answering people's questions?
Well, I understand what you asked, but I'll tell you something. There were so many different questions usually. But I'll tell you what the most important question always arises. It says, how come you had the faith, how come you survived, and a lot of other people next to you didn't survive? And I says, how come you had emunah, you claim that you had emunah Hashem? And I say, yes. I said, I had emunah Hashem because that was my medication. That was what I only think in those terrible days of the concentration camp, that's the only thing I could hold on to. Many, many prisoners came to me and said, "Srulik, why are you trying to encourage us to survive? Don't you see what's going on around you? Don't you see, turn in the back and see that we are going to end up in that pile. We are going to end up there. So why try to survive another day or another week or another month. I mean, it's impossible with all these hunger pains. And I said to them one thing. I says, I want you to know one thing. What you are telling me now hurts me a great deal because I think that you're giving up. I says, listen, I am not a messenger of the Rebbeinu Shloim. I am not a Novi. I don't know more than you or this one or this president or the other one. I says, I don't have any Nevias. But I do know one thing. I know that when you are part of the Hungarian transport, and I know when they took us away, the moment they put us in those transport, in those freight cars, the war was lost. The war was lost maybe a year before that. Germany lost the war in Stalingrad. And many of them know that the war was lost, and they schlepped us to Auschwitz. And I'm telling you, this was the biggest, one of the biggest faults of the biggest sources, a lot written about it by Rebbetzin Parpstein. She wrote a whole book about the folly of the Hungarian Jews, how they were misplaced and mistreated because
Misled.
What? Can't hear you.
Misled. They're also misled.
Misled, right? Because I'll tell you something. They could have been saved. Look here, they transported to Auschwitz about 474,000 nefashas, men, women, and children, Hungarians transport. Now I'll tell you something. It was beginning of 1944. Now I will tell you, it may be many times. Let's assume that we would say just like we said in our camp in Amazay in the last moment, we said we are not going into the tunnels, and I knew they couldn't take us anymore. I mean, they how many people? Let's say it would happen in 1940 and 1939 in Poland and Germany, they would take the machine guns and kill them all. But that couldn't have happened in Hungary because they didn't have actually the killers, the personnel, the Roschem that usually took the lives of men, women, and children in Megalitzi and so forth. They didn't. So if we would have had snow, they would have killed maybe 100,000, 150,000. Fine. But they wouldn't have killed 475,000. So actually, I think we were misled by the Hungarian Judenrat, and it would have told us, Eden, you know where you're going? There was no sign. You're not going to Hungarian farms. It's ridiculous. You're going to Auschwitz. We knew what Auschwitz was. We probably would have resisted, and maybe a lot of us would have gotten killed, but nevertheless, a lot of them would have remained alive too. So this I'm saying that was part of the folly of the Hungarian leadership and so forth. So there are any more questions still before closing?
I think we'll close.
Yeah?
And the bracha. And the bracha has been asked.
We'll close.
Well, I will tell you something. I with the permission of Rabbi Orlofsky, who's a Kohen, I would like to say to all of you, Hamalach hagoel oisi mikol ru, Yivurach eschem b'shem Avruam v'Yitzchak v'Yidgi l'roif. The brucha v'Yidgi l'roif is very important because we all know that the Rebbeinu Shalom, in Bereich of the fish, he created the fish. The fish cannot have a 9 hora. You cannot give a 9 hora for fish. So Yidgi l'roif is a big brucha. V'Yimalei Adoina kol m'sharis libchem l'toivu. And I will say all the young ladies here that are here that need a refuah shalema, the Rebbeinu Shalom should send you a refuah b'meiru. And also shidduchem for your children should be all zivik toiv b'meiru b'yomeni. And I'll tell you something, in name of this Sakmarer, in name of Rabbi, the Klosenburger Rebbe is Chisa Yehuda Leini, who I think he was mostly responsible, he and Rabbi Silver from Cincinnati, and a lot of from Shalichim from Eretz Yisrael, to tell us, reading brothers and sisters, you have no choice. You have to go back to your Messiah. You have to go back to what your parents taught you. And Baruch Hashem, we listened to them, and we accepted that, and we went back. And if it wouldn't be for that, we wouldn't have the Moses HaTorahs in every corner of America, and in Lakewood and here in Eretz Yisrael, thousands and thousands of young people that feel that their part is to before they become involved in maybe in the world, in the business world and so forth, that they have to be something that they know certain mesechtas by very well and so forth, which is very good. Baruch Hashem for that. And if it wouldn't be that we listened to them and we went back to our Masoret from our parents in our shiurim, in our Magidei from Torah, from Gemaras and so forth, that we wouldn't have all these Moses today. Baruch Hashem, we listened to them, and the Rabbi Shalom gave us today all. You have idea in all the corners of America and so forth. People, boys are Torah, girls and boys are sitting and learning Torah and mitzvahs. We should only continue to have nachas from each other. And I would like to thank again Rabbi Orlofsky and Yaakov Meir. And we should all hear serious stories from you. And maybe, just maybe, as again, the Rabbi Shalom is going to give me and my wife strength, and that we'll be able to be here again. Yes,
thank you so much to everybody for coming. There's going to be Ma'ariv after the program.
Oh, good.
And tremendous Yashikayach to,
Yisrael.
Rabbi Yisrael that he came. I can't call him an Adam Chashem now, he'll get upset at me. And for the time that he gave us. And Mitzvah Hashem, when he comes the next time, we'll make it a little longer.
Bye.